My name is Bernard Jefferson. I am 68 years old. For 35 years, I worked as a postal worker, carrying mail through the snow and heat of Chicago streets. I have seen everything there is to see in this city, but nothing could have prepared me for the horror living inside my own house. Every single morning at 5 o'clock, I wake up gripping the cold porcelain of my toilet bowl. I heave until my ribs ache, and my vision blurs with tears. It starts with a strange metallic taste in the back of my throat, followed by a wave of dizziness that makes the floor tiles spin like a carousel. For 3 months, I have felt my strength draining away, leaving me with trembling hands and a mind that feels like it is swimming in fog. The doctors at the clinic told me it was just old age. They looked at my gray hair and my grieving eyes and wrote it off as the early stages of dementia or the physical toll of heartbreak. After all, I had just buried my only son, Terrence, 6 months ago. I almost believed them. I almost accepted that my body was just shutting down because it was too tired to go on without him. But they were wrong. The sickness wasn't coming from inside me. It was wrapped tightly around my left wrist. I am talking about the Patek Philippe watch I wear every second of the day. It is a vintage piece with a gold face and a dark leather strap. It was the last gift Terrence gave me before he died of a sudden massive stroke at only 32 years old. I remember the day he gave it to me. He was a successful corporate lawyer, but he looked so tired that evening. He handed me the box and said, "Pop, you sacrificed your whole life to get me here, so please keep this safe for me." I have not taken it off since his funeral. I sleep with it on. I shower with it on. It is my only connection to my boy. The skin on my wrist underneath the strap was always red, angry, and itching, sometimes peeling in raw flakes. I just told myself it was the summer heat, or maybe an allergy to the old leather. I ignored the burning sensation because the pain made me feel closer to him. Then this morning, the watch stopped. The second hand just froze. Panic surged through me because it felt like I was losing Terrence all over again. I threw on my coat and rushed down to the antique district to see Mr. Cohen. He is a 75-year-old watch repairman who has been fixing clocks in this neighborhood since before I started my mail route. He is a man of few words with eyes that have seen too much history. I placed the watch on his velvet counter and asked him to check the battery. Mr. Cohen adjusted his loop and leaned in close. I watched him casually, expecting him to reach for his screwdriver. Instead, I saw his back stiffen. He stopped breathing for a second. He did not look at the gears. He was staring intensely at the underside of the strap where the leather was slightly cracked. He slowly backed away from the counter, his face turning pale as a sheet. He looked me dead in the eye and shouted in a voice I had never heard him use before. "Take it off, Mr. Jefferson. Right now. Do not touch the back of the strap. Drop it on the tray immediately." I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I did not understand what was happening. I thought he was crazy. But then he put on protective gloves, picked up the watch with tweezers, and showed me something hidden inside that made my blood run cold. Before I tell you what we found, and how it proved my son did not die of natural causes, please hit the like button. It helps this story reach more people who might be in danger. And tell me in the comments, do you believe objects can hold the secrets of the dead? Now let me tell you about the poison. To understand why a piece of leather soaked in poison hurts more than the betrayal itself, you have to understand what I built and who I built it for. I am not a rich man in the way bankers or stockbrokers are rich. My wealth is measured in the miles I walked and the cartilage I wore down in my knees. For 35 years, I wore the blue uniform of the United States Postal Service. In Chicago, that means walking through blizzards that freeze your eyelashes shut and heat waves that melt the asphalt under your boots. I did it every single day, 6 days a week, carrying 50 pounds of mail on my shoulder. I did not complain. I did not call in sick. I did it because I had a little boy at home named Terrence who needed shoes, books, and a future. My wife Sarah passed away when Terrence was only 5 years old. It was just the two of us against the world. I was father and mother, disciplinarian and comforter. Every overtime shift I took had a specific purpose, and that purpose was keeping our 3-story brownstone in the family. You have to understand, in our neighborhood, owning a home like this means something. We bought it back when folks were running away from the city. We polished the original mahogany banisters and restored the crown molding with our own hands. Over the last decade, I watched the neighborhood change. I watched developers in fancy suits knock on doors offering cash to push old black families out so they could chop up our history into luxury condos for newcomers. They call it gentrification. I call it erasure. I held the line. I refused every offer because this house was not an asset to be sold. It was the foundation for Terrence. It was the generational wealth that would ensure my son and his children would never have to struggle the way I did. I wanted Terrence to inherit a kingdom, not a mortgage. I sent him to law school with the money I saved, dime by dime. When he graduated, I cried like a baby. I thought the hard part was over. I thought I had secured our legacy. I did not know that the biggest threat to our home would not come from a developer with a wrecking ball, but from the woman my son promised to love and cherish. Then came Tiffany. I remember the first time Terrence brought her home for Sunday dinner. She was a beautiful woman, I cannot deny that. She had blonde hair and a smile that could light up a room, but it never seemed to reach her eyes. She was polite, shaking my hand with a grip that felt cold. But what I noticed immediately was not how she looked at my son, but how she looked at my house. She did not look at the family photos on the mantelpiece or the diploma on the wall. Her eyes were scanning the square footage, assessing the high ceilings, and calculating the market value of the antique chandeliers. It was the look of an appraiser, not a daughter-in-law. I tried to be welcoming. I told myself that love is blind, and that if Terrence was happy, I should be happy. But as soon as the ring was on her finger, the changes began. It started small. She said the house felt too dark and old-fashioned. She started painting over the beautiful dark wood with sterile shades of gray and white. It felt like she was turning our home into a hospital ward, or one of those soulless model apartments. Then came the day I came home to find her throwing out boxes in the alley. I looked inside and saw Sarah's old quilt, the one she hand-stitched before she died. Tiffany told me it smelled musty and didn't fit the aesthetic she was going for. I rescued that quilt and hid it in my closet, but a part of me broke that day. I tried to talk to Terrence, but he was so in love, so blinded. He told me that Tiffany just wanted to modernize things, that I needed to be more open to change. He was working 80 hours a week at his law firm to pay for her lifestyle, looking more exhausted every time I saw him. Then 6 months ago, the unthinkable happened. My strong, brilliant boy collapsed in his office. The coroner said it was a massive heart attack, brought on by stress and overwork. I buried my only child. I stood by that grave and felt my soul turn to ash. Tiffany cried, of course. She played the part of the grieving widow, perfectly accepting condolences and casseroles. But the tears dried up remarkably fast. Less than a month after the funeral, while the dirt was still fresh on Terrence's grave, she sat me down at the kitchen table. She slid a glossy brochure across the marble countertop. It was for a nursing home called Golden Horizons. She held my hand, her voice dripping with fake concern. She told me that she was worried about me. She said I was forgetting things, that I was leaving the stove on, which was a lie. She said the house was too big for me to manage, and that the stairs were dangerous for my knees. She said she wanted to sell the brownstone, invest the money, and put me somewhere safe where professionals could look after me. She said it was what Terrence would have wanted. She said it was best for her son, my grandson Leo, to have the money for his college fund, rather than tying it up in an old, dusty building. I looked at her, and for the first time I saw the predator beneath the skin. She didn't care about my health. She wanted the house. She wanted the millions it was worth. And now that Terrence was gone, I was the only obstacle standing between her and a payday. I refused, of course. I told her I was staying put. That is when my health started to decline. That is when the nausea started. That is when she started making me coffee every morning with a smile that terrified me. The silence in Mr. Cohen's shop was usually comforting, filled only with the rhythmic ticking of 100 grandfather clocks. But right now, that silence felt heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. I watched paralyzed as he used a pair of long silver tweezers to lift my watch from the velvet counter. He moved with the precision of a surgeon, his hand steady, but his eyes behind those thick glasses were filled with a kind of terrified respect. He dropped the watch onto a stainless steel surgical tray. The metal clatter echoed in the small room, making me flinch. I asked him what was wrong, my voice trembling, but he didn't answer immediately. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small glass vial containing a clear liquid and a pair of heavy rubber gloves. He put the gloves on slowly, never taking his eyes off the leather strap that had been hugging my wrist for 6 months. With a glass dropper, he carefully released a single bead of the liquid onto the inner lining of the watch band, right where it had been rubbing against my pulse point. I expected nothing to happen, maybe a wet spot. Instead, the reaction was immediate and violent. The liquid hissed. A small plume of acrid greenish smoke rose up, and the leather bubbled as if it were alive. The smell hit me instantly, chemical and sharp, burning the inside of my nose. Mr. Cohen stepped back and covered his mouth with his hand. He looked at me and said, "Mr. Jefferson, you are a lucky man to be standing here. This strap is not leather. It is a synthetic porous material that has been soaked in a high concentration of dimethylmercury. It is an extremely potent neurotoxin. It doesn't need to be injected or swallowed. It absorbs directly through the skin." My knees gave out. I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep from falling. I felt the room spinning again, but this time it wasn't the poison. It was the betrayal. I stammered that it was impossible. I told him my son gave me that watch. I told him my boy loved me and would never hurt me. The thought that Terrence, my beautiful boy, who I raised on my own, could have tried to kill me was more painful than the poison itself. I felt tears, hot and fast, streaming down my face. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to die right there rather than believe my son wanted me dead. Mr. Cohen shook his head firmly. He walked around the counter and put a hand on my shoulder. He told me to listen to him. He said, "The watch is a Patek Philippe. The movement is authentic. But this strap is a cheap aftermarket piece. Your son did not put this strap on this watch. No watch lover would do that. Someone changed it after he bought it. Someone wanted you to wear this specific strap." He then went back to the tray. With the tweezers, he flipped the watch over. He picked up a jeweler's screwdriver the size of a needle. He said, "Your son knew something was wrong. He knew he couldn't just tell you. So he did what people have done with these watches for 100 years. He used it as a safe." I watched him unscrew the case back. The gold backing lifted off, revealing the mesmerizing, intricate gears of the internal mechanism. It was a mechanical heartbeat. Mr. Cohen didn't touch the gears. Instead, he used a specialized tool to lift the balance wheel ever so slightly. There, tucked into a space no bigger than a fingernail, was a tiny black square. A micro SD card. It was so small that if you blinked, you would miss it. Mr. Cohen took the card out and inserted it into a reader attached to his laptop. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. He clicked on a file. An audio waveform appeared on the screen. He turned the speakers up and pressed play. The voice that filled the room made me scream. It was Terrence. But it wasn't the strong, confident voice of the lawyer I knew. It was a whisper, breathless and terrified, recorded in a bathroom or a closet. The audio crackled, and then his voice became clear. "Pop, if you are listening to this, I am probably already gone. I don't have much time. Tiffany is in the other room." I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. My dead son was speaking to me. He continued saying, "I know why I have been getting sick, Pop. It is not stress." I found the receipt in her bag. "She is putting arsenic in my protein shakes. I tried to leave, but she threatened to hurt Leo. She made me sign a new will yesterday, Pop. She forced my hand. She gets everything. The house, the accounts, the insurance." There was a pause in the recording, just the sound of him breathing heavily, struggling for air. Then he spoke again, faster this time. "She asked me about the watch I bought for you. She offered to wrap it. Pop, do not trust her. If she gives you this watch, check the strap. She was talking to someone on the phone about absorption rates. I swapped the watch head onto this cheap strap she bought because I had to hide this card somewhere she wouldn't look. But I think she is going to swap it again after I am gone. She wants the house, Pop. She wants the brownstone. She hates that you are still living there." The recording ended with the sound of a door handle turning and Terrence quickly whispering, "I love you, Dad. Save Leo." The silence returned to the shop, but now it was a deafening roar in my head. I stared at the laptop screen, then at the bubbling strap on the tray. The puzzle pieces slammed together with the force of a freight train. The nausea, the dizziness. The doctors telling me it was old age. It wasn't dementia. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being murdered. Tiffany didn't just kill my son. She watched him die, took the watch from his body, removed the safe strap he had put on, and replaced it with the poisoned one. She gave it to me at the funeral, crying crocodile tears, telling me Terrence wanted me to have it. Every time I hugged her, every time I thanked her for taking care of me, I was wearing the weapon she crafted to kill me. She was playing the long game. She knew if I died of a sudden heart attack right after Terrence, it would look suspicious. So she chose a poison that mimicked the decline of old age. She wanted everyone to think Bernard Jefferson just got old, lost his mind, and faded away, leaving her with a multi-million-dollar historic home and a fresh start. I looked at my wrist. The skin was red and raw where the strap had been. It was not a rash. It was a chemical burn. I felt a fire ignite in my belly that had nothing to do with the poison. It was the rage of a father who had just found out his son was slaughtered. It was the fury of a man who realized the monster was sleeping down the hall. I stopped crying. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I looked at Mr. Cohen. He looked back at me, ready to call 911. I told him no. I told him not to call the police yet. If we called them now, she would claim she didn't know. She would say, "I bought the strap myself." She would say the recording was fake or that Terrence was delirious. I needed her to confess. I needed to catch her in the act. I looked at the deadly strap on the tray, and then at the innocent-looking watch face. A plan began to form in my mind. A plan cold enough to freeze hell over. I asked Mr. Cohen if he had a strap that looked exactly like that one. He nodded. I told him to put it on. I told him I was going home. I was going to finish what my son started. I was going to play the role she wrote for me. I would be the sick, dying old man one last time. But this time the prey was going to become the predator. I wanted to run out of that shop and tear my house apart. I wanted to scream until my lungs gave out. The rage was a physical thing, hot and heavy in my chest, demanding release. I turned toward the door, ready to storm back to the brownstone and confront the woman who had murdered my son. But Mr. Cohen grabbed my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong for a man of his age. He looked me dead in the eye and told me to stop. He said that if I went back there now, screaming about poison and murder, she would simply call the police and tell them I had finally lost my mind. He reminded me that the poisoned strap was no longer on my wrist. It was here in his shop. If I confronted her without it on, she would claim I took it off myself, that I tampered with it, or worse, that I was making the whole thing up. She would say I was a senile old man, hallucinating from grief. Without a confession, without her admitting it, while she thought she was safe, I would just be the crazy father-in-law, and she would walk away with everything. I knew he was right. The law does not care about what you know. It only cares about what you can prove. I had to swallow my anger. I had to push the fire down deep into my belly and let it turn into ice. I needed a plan, and Mr. Cohen had the first piece of it. He directed me to a pawn shop 3 blocks over, where I found a cheap knockoff watch that looked almost exactly like my Patek Philippe. It had a fake leather strap that smelled like plastic, but from a distance it was identical. I strapped it to my wrist. It felt like putting on armor. I was no longer just a retired postal worker. I was a soldier going behind enemy lines. I thanked Mr. Cohen, told him to keep the real watch and the evidence safe, and I walked out into the cold Chicago wind. My hands were not shaking anymore. My mind was clear. I was going home to die, or at least that is what I needed Tiffany to believe. Walking back into my own house felt like stepping into a tomb. The air smelled of the lavender air freshener Tiffany sprayed everywhere to cover up the scent of the old wood and memories. She was in the kitchen humming to herself as she chopped vegetables. The sight of her so casual, so alive while my son lay rotting in the ground made my stomach turn. But I did not yell. Instead, I let my shoulders slump. I dragged my feet. I made my hands tremble as I reached for the doorframe. When she turned around, I put on the performance of a lifetime. I looked at her with vacant, watery eyes and asked her where Sarah was. Sarah, my wife, who had been dead for 20 years. Tiffany did not even blink. A small, cruel smile touched the corners of her lips. She walked over to me, guiding me to the armchair like I was a toddler. She told me Sarah was at the store and that I should just sit down and rest. She looked at my wrist, checking to make sure the watch was still there. When she saw the dark strap, she relaxed. She thought the poison was still seeping into my veins. She thought she had won. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed listening to the house settle, waiting for the right moment. When I heard her bedroom door close, I crept out of bed. I did not move like a sick old man. I moved with the silence of a ghost. I had spent 40 years delivering mail. I knew how to be invisible. I went to the basement where I kept my old toolkit. I had stopped at a spy shop on the way home, a place usually frequented by jealous husbands and private investigators. I had 3 tiny cameras no bigger than a button. I placed the first one in the living room, hidden inside the spine of a hollowed-out book on the shelf. The second one went into the kitchen, tucked above the cabinets where the shadows were deep. The third one I placed right in the dining room, pointing directly at the head of the table where I used to sit, where Terrence used to sit. This was where the final act would play out. The next morning, I ramped up the act. I spilled my coffee on purpose. I called my grandson Leo by his father's name. It broke my heart to see the confusion in the little boy's eyes, but I had to do it. I had to make sure Tiffany believed I was too far gone to be a threat. It worked. By noon, I heard her on the phone in the sunroom. She did not even bother to close the door fully. She was speaking in a low, excited voice. I crept closer, pressing my ear to the gap. She was talking to a real estate agent. She told them to have the paperwork ready. She said the situation had accelerated and that the current owner would not be an issue by next week. She actually laughed. She said I was fading fast and that the house would be on the market before the first snow fell. Hearing her plan my death while I was standing 10 feet away gave me the final push I needed. I went to my room and made a call to an old friend of mine, Doc. Doc used to work for the coroner's office before he went private. I told him I needed a favor. I needed a blood test, and I needed it off the books fast. He came over an hour later posing as a phlebotomist sent by the insurance company. Tiffany let him in thinking it was just part of the routine checkup she had orchestrated to document my decline. Doc took my blood, his eyes widening when he saw the redness on my wrist, but he said nothing. He winked at me as he packed up his kit. 2 hours later, I got a text on my burner phone. The results were positive. High levels of mercury. Not enough to kill me yet, but enough to mimic severe neurological damage. I had the smoking gun. Now I just needed the confession. It was time to spring the trap. I waited until Tiffany was in a particularly good mood, probably dreaming of the millions she was about to steal. I sat her down and told her in a shaky, weak voice that she was right. I told her I couldn't handle the house anymore. I told her I was scared of the ghosts I was seeing. I told her I wanted to sign everything over to her now, while I still had a moment of clarity so she could take care of Leo. I saw the greed flare up in her eyes like a match struck in the dark. She tried to hide it, squeezing my hand and telling me it was the right decision, that she would take such good care of me at Golden Horizons. I told her to call her parents. I said I wanted family there to witness it. I wanted them to know that I was doing right by their daughter. I knew her parents. They were vultures just like her people who had spent their lives chasing money they didn't earn. I knew they wouldn't miss the chance to see their daughter hit the jackpot. Tiffany was thrilled. She immediately started making calls, setting up a dinner for the following night. She called it a celebration of life. I called it a funeral for her freedom. Then I made the most important call of all. I called Marcus. Marcus wasn't just a lawyer. He was Terrence's best friend since kindergarten. He had been suspicious of Tiffany from day one, but he never had proof. When I told him what I had found, when I told him about the watch and the recording, there was a silence on the other end of the line that was terrifying. Then he told me he would be there. He said he would bring the papers. He said he would bring the thunder. The stage was set. The cameras were recording. The blood results were printed and hidden in my jacket pocket. The fake watch was ticking on my wrist, a constant reminder of the time running out for Tiffany. I looked around the house that my father had bought, the house I had preserved for Terrence. I ran my hand along the mahogany banister. I whispered a promise to my son. I told him to watch closely. He was about to see his father do what he did best: deliver. But this time I wasn't delivering mail. I was delivering justice. The living room was filled with the people who wanted to pick my bones clean. Tiffany had set the table with the good china, the set my wife Sarah had bought for special occasions. Her parents were there, sitting on my sofa, drinking my wine and looking around the room like they were already measuring the windows for new drapes. Marcus, my lawyer, and Terrence's best friend sat in the corner with his briefcase on his lap. He was the only one who wasn't smiling. Tiffany placed the transfer deed in front of me, The paper was crisp and white, a death warrant for my legacy. She leaned in close, her perfume suffocating me. She whispered that I should just sign right there on the line. She said, "Sign it, Pop, and then you can finally rest. We will take care of everything." I picked up the heavy fountain pen. My hand was trembling just as I had practiced. I touched the tip of the pen to the paper. The room went silent. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the old man to give away his kingdom. I drew a breath, but instead of signing, I let the trembling in my hand stop. I sat up straight. I pushed my shoulders back. The fog in my eyes cleared instantly, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a man who has walked through hell and come back with a torch. I looked directly at her. "Tiffany," I asked, my voice steady and deep, booming through the silent room, "do you remember the smell of almonds in Terrence's morning coffee?" The smile dropped from her face so fast, it was like a mask shattering. Her skin turned the color of ash. She stammered and asked what I was talking about. Her mother stood up, looking confused. I didn't look away from Tiffany. I reached for the watch on my wrist. I unbuckled the strap slowly. I held it up so she could see it. Then I threw it hard onto the mahogany table. It hit the wood with a loud crack that made her jump. I told her that Terrence said he missed her. I told her that he told me everything. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the tiny micro SD card, holding it up like a diamond. I told her that my son didn't just leave me a watch. He left me a witness. I told her I knew about the arsenic. I knew about the mercury in the strap. I knew she had been killing me by the inch for 6 months. Panic took over her face. It was the terrified look of a trapped animal. She lunged across the table, her fingernails clawing at the air, trying to snatch the memory card from my hand. She screamed that I was a lying old lunatic and that she would put me in the ground right next to my son. But before her fingers could even graze my skin, the room was flooded with red and blue lights flashing through the front window. The sound of sirens cut through the night, loud and screaming right outside the front door. I had timed it perfectly. The front door burst open. Police officers poured into the hallway, their weapons drawn. Marcus stood up and handed the detective a thick folder. It contained the audio files, the toxicology report from my blood showing the mercury poisoning, and the lab results from the real watch strap that Mr. Cohen was keeping safe as evidence. Tiffany tried to run toward the back door, but 2 officers grabbed her. As they cuffed her hands behind her back, I saw the arrogance finally leave her eyes. It was replaced by the crushing weight of reality. The detective read her rights, listing the charges. First-degree murder of Terrence Jefferson, attempted murder of Bernard Jefferson, fraud, forgery. But the justice didn't stop there. As Tiffany was being dragged out, screaming and crying, the officers turned to her parents. Marcus had found the bank transfers. Tiffany had been siphoning money from Terrence's accounts into her parents' names for months. They were accomplices. They were charged with conspiracy and grand larceny. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs, their greed leading them straight to a prison cell instead of a retirement villa. The house went quiet. The police left. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed it. I walked over to the window and watched the squad cars drive away, taking the poison out of my life forever. I went upstairs to Leo's room. My grandson was sleeping safe and sound. I sat on the edge of his bed and watched his chest rise and fall. The court gave me full custody. The brownstone was safe. But more importantly, I had kept my promise to Terrence. I set up a scholarship fund in his name for young law students from our neighborhood. The money Tiffany tried to steal would now be used to build the next generation of defenders. I looked at my wrist, bare and healing, and I finally felt peace. The watch was gone, but the time I had left belonged to me and my grandson. This story taught me that a father's intuition is a powerful weapon that should never be underestimated. My son may have been blinded by love, but in the end his spirit guided me to the truth. We must remember that generational wealth is not just money. It is the sweat, tears, and sacrifice of our ancestors who fought for every inch of ground we stand on. It is our duty to protect it from wolves disguised as sheep who try to steal it under the name of love. We must be the guardians of our legacy, because if we do not protect what is ours, no one else will. Justice might seem slow and the night might seem long, but if we stay awake and stay alert, the morning always comes. If you felt a sense of relief seeing Tiffany finally pay for her crimes, please hit the like button to show your support for justice. I want to hear from you in the comments. Write the words "justice served" and tell me what city you are watching from right now. It comforts me to know I am not alone in this fight. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story. I will be here tomorrow with another truth that needs to be told. Until then, hold your family close and keep your eyes open.